Imagine walking into a hardware store and grabbing a brand new 100-watt light bulb. You take it home, screw it in, and you expect a very specific, guaranteed level of brightness, right? Well, what if I told you that a 100-watt label actually guarantees you absolutely nothing? In fact, depending on the conditions, that exact same bulb might just give you a pathetic, dim glow, or it could dramatically overheat and blow a fuse. The answer to this everyday paradox is actually hidden in the invisible physics flowing right through your walls.
Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to map out current electricity, the master blueprint. We're going to completely demystify this flow. We'll zoom all the way in to look at the microscopic chaos of a single electron, and then we're going to zoom right back out to see how those tiny frantic movements literally dictate the design of massive macroscopic power grids. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover today, so let's jump right in.
Act 1. The microscopic flow. Okay, let's start by challenging how we think about flow. We naturally picture current like water rushing through a pipe from point A to point B. And by universal convention, we say current direction follows positive charge flow, which, ironically, is strictly opposite to how the electrons are actually moving. But here is the truly mind-bending part. Even though it has a physical direction, current is a scalar quantity, not a vector. So if wires meet in a straight T-junction or a sharply angled Y-junction, it literally doesn't matter. 10 amps plus 5 amps is always going to be 15 amps. It follows simple algebra, totally ignoring the geometric angles of the wires themselves.
So, if we zoom in, what does this flow actually look like? Well, I can tell you it's definitely not a smooth highway. Without a battery hooked up, electrons are just buzzing around in random, chaotic thermal motion. The net flow is exactly zero. But the moment you apply a battery, you establish an electric field that puts a uniform force on those electrons. Even then, they don't just fly straight. They're violently colliding with atoms, losing momentum constantly. But because of that electric field, they do manage this bumpy average forward progress that we call drift velocity. And the average time they get between these microscopic crashes, that's called the relaxation time. And it's basically the hidden metronome pacing every electrical circuit on Earth.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how that microscopic bumpiness perfectly links up to macroscopic, measurable current. It all comes down to one core formula. Current equals N times E times area times drift velocity. Just think about what happens when a physical wire changes shape. If the wire narrows and the cross-sectional area decreases, the total current flowing through the system has to stay constant. There's nowhere else for it to go. So to squeeze that exact same amount of flow through a much tighter space, the drift velocity, the current density, and the internal electric field must all strictly increase to compensate.
Act 2. Resistance and temperature.
You've almost certainly heard of Ohm's law. Voltage equals current times resistance. But let's think about what resistance is, anatomically speaking. Really, resistance is just collision-induced opposition to flow. It's a physical gauntlet every electron has to run, and it's dictated by a few precise factors. The length of the wire, because a longer wire just means more collisions, the cross-sectional area, a narrower wire gives them less room to maneuver, and of course the temperature and the specific atomic nature of the material itself, which we call resistivity.
And this brings us to a really fascinating seesaw effect when it comes to temperature. If you heat up a standard metal conductor, the atomic lattice starts vibrating violently. The collision rate shoots up, that relaxation time drops, and boom, resistance increases. Basically, heat hurts normal metal conductivity. But look at semiconductors like silicon. This is wild. When you heat up a semiconductor, that thermal energy literally breaks internal bonds, which causes the number of available charge carriers to spike massively. This sudden flood of new carriers completely overpowers the drop in relaxation time. So totally counterintuitively, as a semiconductor gets hotter, its resistance actually decreases, which, by the way, is exactly why managing heat in our silicon computer chips is absolutely crucial.
Let's start putting these pieces together. Act 3. Designing circuit networks.
When we're building circuit networks, we are mostly playing with two structural game pieces, series and parallel. In a series setup, everything is strung together in a single unbranching line. So the current is rigidly constant everywhere, but the voltage divides up among the components. And the total equivalent resistance? It just stacks up simply, R1 plus R2 and so on. But in a parallel setup, the pathways branch out. Here, the voltage is what stays locked and constant across all the branches, while the current divides itself up.
And because you're literally opening up new lanes for the electrical traffic, your equivalent total resistance actually drops, which we calculate using an inverse fraction formula.
But what's actually pushing that current through our network? Let's take an X-ray look inside a battery. You know that 9-volt rating printed on the package? That is its electromotive force, or EMF. But batteries are made of physical chemistry, electrodes and electrolytes, and that chemistry naturally opposes flow from the inside out. We call this internal resistance. Because of this, the battery literally eats a portion of its own voltage before the energy even leaves the casing. So the actual potential difference delivered to your circuit, the terminal voltage, is always going to be lower than that shiny EMF number printed on the label when the circuit is running. So, here's the million-dollar engineering question. How do you string batteries together to power massive grids without losing all your energy to that internal resistance? You could stack them in series to boost the total voltage, sure, or put them in parallel to drop the internal resistance. But the holy grail of grid scaling is the maximum power theorem. If you want to maximize current in a massive array, you have to follow one golden rule. Current is maximized only when your external physical resistance perfectly matches the net internal resistance of your entire battery network. In circuit design, balance is absolutely everything.
Now let's look at the absolute rule book for these grids. Act 4, Governing Circuit Laws.
For complex multi-loop grids, we rely heavily on Kirchhoff's laws. First up is the junction law, or KCL. It simply states that the net current at any junction is exactly zero. Whatever flows in must flow out. It's just the conservation of charge. The second is the loop law, or KVL, which states the algebraic sum of all voltage drops in a closed loop is zero. This is the conservation of energy. And your mathematical precision really matters here. If you trace a loop in the exact same direction as the current, you drop potential. That's a negative IR. But if you trace backwards against the current, you gain potential.
Physicists came up with an ingenious way to physically apply these Kirchhoff laws to measure things, creating tools like the Wheatstone bridge. The idea is, when a central galvanometer shows exactly zero deflection, meaning absolutely no current is crossing the middle of the bridge, the whole system is perfectly balanced, and that means the ratios of the opposing resistors are perfectly equal. Engineers physicalize this concept into something called a meter bridge, which uses a simple 1-meter wire and a sliding contact point. By sliding it to find that exact null balance point, they can instantly calculate the value of an unknown resistor. It's essentially an elegant, highly accurate physical calculator.
All right, bringing it all home. Act 5, Power and Heat Paradoxes.
Remember those violent microscopic electron collisions we talked about in Act 1? Well, they aren't just slowing down the flow, they're releasing energy. Joule's law tells us that the heat generated in a circuit is literally just the kinetic energy lost during those microscopic crashes. Mathematically, heat equals current squared times resistance times time. But calculating power, that gets a bit tricky depending on your network. In a series circuit, where current is the law constant, power equals I squared R. That means higher resistance creates higher power dissipation. But in a parallel circuit, voltage is your constant. So there, power equals V squared divided by R, meaning lower resistance yields higher power. The rules of power totally flip depending on what stays constant.
And that beautifully brings us right back to our opening mystery, the bulb paradox. Why doesn't a 100-watt bulb just give you 100 watt of light? Because that printed label is a complete trap if you ignore the math. A bulb only outputs 100 watts if connected to its exact rated voltage. The only physical constant inside that glass bulb is the tungsten filament's actual physical resistance. You have to extract that resistance constant first. If the applied voltage from your wall happens to be lower than the rated voltage on the box, you get suboptimal power and a very sad, dim bulb. But if it's higher, you generate excessive heat, overpowered brightness, and a blown fuse.
So, the master blueprint we've explored today reveals one ultimate truth about electricity. Higher actual power dissipated mathematically in the circuit is what equals higher physical brightness. You literally cannot just look at the printed label on the box and trust it. Physics dictates that true power lies entirely in the interaction of drift velocity, physical resistance, and applied voltage. So the next time you flip a switch and expect a certain result, are you really getting what you paid for? Or are you just at the mercy of the grid's mathematical blueprint? Keep exploring, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.